Hello, viewers, and welcome to the very first episode of the Veebee Money Show. And on our show, we have a very special guest, Dr. Ankit Shah. And rather than me introducing Ankit Shah, I would request Ankit Shah to tell us more about his himself and also to lead us on as to how he came to becoming a Sanatani Dharma propagandist.
Yep. So uh, it's always a pleasure that you have hosted me here, and I would regularly like to come on the channel so that the viewers and all those all those people who are having different kinds of perspectives, they are able to interact and have a say on what the modern economics direction should be like. So I am basically a chartered accountant, a fellow chartered accountant, and a company secretary by qualification. My birth was Chennai, and I've brought up and trained at Surat. And right now I do my consultancy from Ahmedabad. So looking at how the world functions, I have derived my own understanding of how ancient India used to function, specifically with the background that for 1700 years, we've been giving 27% to the world GDP. And that was without English language, without modern technology, which we claim right now is supposed to be so effective. Without all of that, the Indian subcontinent was able to give 27% to the world GDP. So that kind of intrigued me to, dig out what our traditional economic models were and how were they functioning, which is why the first book which I came up with was where I give a concluding chapter on Chakravarti Bharat 2047 and its sphere of influence, because that takes us back to the economic throne that we were before invaders came in. So that's something similar kind of an intent of arriving and reaching a position by 2047. That book has 8 co-authors, including Ambassador Kapoor, and you have Air Marshal Anil Chopra, and so on, many other stalwarts. But I gave the concluding chapter on it. And in that chapter, the 3 major elements which I explained was the re-emergence of dharmas, the re-emergence of Sanatan economics model, and the re-emergence of Asia in the global order. These are the 3 elements of how we reach a Chakravarti Bharat of 2047. Now, the second book is about geopolitics, which covers not just narrative warfare and all the dollarization process that we saw in the previous century till now. It also covers the entire de-dollarization cycle, how everything which was planned event-wise since 1971, unhooking of dollar from the gold standard. Now all those events are one after the other reversing. So the second book covers that part along with the geopolitical portions of narrative warfare and soft power colonization, etc. And the third book, which is coming this year, is on the Sanatan economics model, where I'm going to lay out how ancient India economy used to function, giving the stress on the life cycle economics of our ancient India ecosystem that we had developed without harming the natural resources, still giving 27% to the world GDP without massive corporate setup, without profit-only orientation, and without any exploitation to any other countries or natural resources. So that's the third book which is going to come up this year.
Thank you, Ankit. You're always mesmerizing. And, since all these issues that are cropping up, we've heard of the Silicon Valley Bank collapse. So in light of that, I wanted to ask you the fact that, we all hear that the US debt ceiling has been breached, $31.4 trillion unsustainable debt. So how do you expect the USD to behave prior to the BRICS currencies born?
Yeah. So the BRICS currency discussion is going to happen in August in Africa Summit. And we already seeing the kind of chaos in Africa and Brazil internally going on. in terms of the polity being shaken from inside. Whereas the three governments in terms of the Russian Vladimir Putin, the Xi Jinping government, and the Indian government going strong as of now. Looking at that background, what I see is that the currency discussion that happens in August is going to also be a discussion about which new members are going to be included and what are the regulations for the new membership. Specifically, as you see, the traditional allies, Saudi Arabia and UAE, putting up application for joining the membership. Now, this is a big shift, right?
Yeah.
Because coming out from the Western influence, if they are going to sell out crude oil, that is energy outside of the US dollar, and the BRICS currency is something that they are looking for to park their savings. Now, we need to understand one fact here, which is that the Gulf has realized that it lost about 50% of its crude oil wealth over the last 3 decades by parking savings in a US dollar, which is a fiat currency printed totally out of thin air, right?
Correct.
So they understand that a currency, a reserve currency, which is having a diminishing purchasing power. If you start from 1913 Federal Reserve to this point, about 99% of the purchasing power of the dollar is lost. So now, what sense does it make to park savings in a currency which has lost 98% of its purchasing power already, which is fiat backed by nothing, right? So when I see that the BRICS currency format is going to be discussed in August, I believe the interest of the new applicants is particularly because of this currency, which is going to be pegged with a basket of commodities. 100% gold is going to be one element out of it. And we see their interest particularly because once they are out of this limited crude oil wealth that they have, which is 20-30 years of stock left, they need to end up with something accumulated which represents some real value, which is why I say that the entire world is going to move towards a pegged currency world. Now, some of the counter arguments which I get is the pegged currency world cannot deliver the kind of growth which debt-based model used to give. Now, there are also counter arguments like this sounds like some kind of a barter system which a primitive world used to have. Now, my understanding is that, the definition of growth when you talk about, especially post-Bretton Woods, when they came up with this indexes called the gross domestic product and the per capita income. Now, both these indexes, I'm contesting these indexes in my Sanatan economics model. I'll tell you exactly why. The formula of GDP says consumption plus investment plus government expenditure plus net of exports imports. Now if you are investing some money today, you are going to get some output out of it, and that is what you are going to consume as well.
Correct.
The remaining portion is going to be your savings. So investment is sourced from two places. One is either debt, second is your savings, either of the two. Now, I do not understand how do you add investment with consumption, and that too for a particular year. So suppose if I'm investing 10 crores today, and throughout the year, I'm getting, say, 10 lakhs, and I'm going to earn 10 lakhs, and I'm going to consume from that 10 lakhs. Now, I don't understand how my value, my net worth is going to be 110 for this year. I do not see any logic except the fact that since you had a reserve currency with endless printing, you could give low interest rate loans, which is why you added investment with the consumption, because you were also doing socialist freebies with that endless printing of currency.
Correct.
So you came up with a formula for mapping all the economies of the world, which suits your reserve currency status. Right now, and also understand when this Western Abrahamic format thought process, which is talking about one life, when they talk about consumption and spending, I do not understand that tomorrow, if you're deploying women in their fertile years as as a unit of labor for temporary GDP,
Right.
all these economies, US, Russian, Chinese, European Union, Japan, all these economies, they have lost the birth rates. How are they going to continue as a civilization? Second thing, when you are looking at the world from this Abrahamic economics viewpoint of one life,
Right.
what that means is that you are focusing primarily on material and the machine factor of production.
Right.
Okay, because man is just a factor of production for you in the industrialized capitalized world. You are just looking them as a factor of production. You're making man factor of production compete with the machine factor of production, which is technology. Tomorrow, if artificial intelligence is going to take up all these jobs,
Yeah.
humans, you imagine how we are going to justify payments to the man factor of production without any actual work. And if you're not able to justify that, how the government or the state is going to take this entire burden of massive human population out of jobs. So this,
Right.
so this obsession of one life concept, which comes from Abrahamic religions, has caused capitalism to make technology compete with the man factor of production instead of man being complemented by the technology. So there's no balance out here because profits is the only objective that they got. So I'm afraid all these economies are going to collapse. You're already seeing the European Union importing radicals from the Middle East uh,
Yeah.
to make up for the falling birth rates.
Yeah.
And these radicals are eventually going to take over their wealth because
Absolutely.
you don't have any birth rates at the end of the day, right?
Absolutely.
So Japan, you are seeing that the entire population has become aged. How it is going to move forward? The Chinese economy at this point in time, I mean, by 2029, I see a 4-to-1 crisis where 4 grandparents, 2 parents, and only one person earning, and
Wow.
that guy is also not getting a wife to marry,
Wow.
right? So you see
Total destruction of a civilization.
total complete, they don't have civilizational wisdom of life cycle, which is why all this is happening. Post 2029, you wonder, you'll have 40-50 million Chinese men without any woman to marry, and 4 grandparents and 2 parents to take care of.
Yeah.
I don't know how that sustains. So I have no clue. How will it stand? It's a total social and economic chaos. Similarly, with the American, we all know American economy is based on immigrants.
Yeah.
Now, after de-dollarization, when the
Yeah.
interest regime, when the real interest regime picks up in the economy,
Yeah.
you imagine the kind of innovation that it was able to do will be no more possible. We have the news of Silicon Valley Bank today
Yeah.
facing a banking crisis. It's going to start very soon. Once Credit Suisse falls, there will be a contagion effect throughout the Western banking systems. But we are already seeing the trailer today with the the Silicon Valley Bank. All the startup funding is going to vanish because this was fueled by the endless printing of the fiat dollar. Now, you need to understand that since January 2022, none of the ally countries have parked their savings in the US Treasury, which is exactly why now they are shit scared of printing the new dollars, because the entire COVID checks which were printed in the last 3 years are haunting them back with massive
Yeah.
inflation.
Yeah.
Massive inflation. Now, you have to understand that in a high interest regime, the innovation which the West used to have would not happen. Second, the decoupling with the Chinese economy will
Yeah.
take them to a position
Yeah.
where they will have to manufacture home. And once they start manufacturing home, if this made in USA or made in Europe product need to compete with a Asian product, I'm seeing a literal trim of 60% to the American levels of salaries and the American economy. About 25% cut in defense spending, which I've already predicted, 35% cut in entitlement benefits, 401k, retirement benefits, income security, food stamps, all of this. So
It's total mayhem.
total mayhem. And the NRIs need to understand, because we have a lot many non-resident Indians who are very pretty successful over there. In a high interest regime, it's only the NRIs who are going to get the loans, because they have the family backing, because of the life cycle civilizational wisdom they have. They have the understanding of saving concept,
Correct.
compared to the Western counterparts who do not understand what saving means,
Right.
because they were drugged with this endless printing of currencies. So only NRIs will get loans,
Yeah.
which will be the starting point of a street clash between the native Western population and the NRIs. It's going to be very brutal, organized attack crime kind of a scene that we'll be seeing in 1.5 to 2 years.
So the Khalistani impact that we're seeing on the temples in Montreal and in Australia is going to play out on a larger scale in the United States.
On a very large scale. And
Yeah.
do note that the American population carries guns with them.
Yes.
Do note this.
Yes. So, with this, you served a warning bell, and all this is obviously going to play out in the dollar, right? So how do you expect the dollar to behave prior to the BRICS being formed?
I believe that prior to the pilot transactions of BRICS currency that begins, you will see the US dollar will suck back the entire reserve currency bubble from the US stocks, bonds, and derivatives. I have predicted by December 2023, you will see a minimum of 15 to 35% slash throughout the US stocks, bonds, and derivatives market. And especially the IT sector is going to be, almost collapsing, because it was born with the fiat reserve currency dollar. So it is the first de-dollarization which we saw with the euro currency, slashed about 78% valuations in the dot-com burst that we saw in 2002. This is the final round of de-dollarization going on. So you can expect the IT sector to completely collapse, which means that a lot many of Indian verticals sitting in Bangalore, Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai, who are dependent on Western client revenues, they are going to find it very, very difficult to sustain and survive. I believe the IT sector is going to take a huge beating, along with the realty sector in China, because these are the two main places where the reserve currency bubble has settled.
Yes. So, as we said that the US debt at 31.8 trillion is unsustainable. Currently the estimates on the Chinese debt, internal, external, are hovering around 45 trillion to even as of present day around 52, 53 trillion dollars. Do you think that the Chinese economy can bounce back? And how do you expect the next few years to play out? Clearly, Chinese debt is unsustainable.
So this was a deal between the US and the Chinese Communist Party after the fiat reserve currency dollar of 1971. In 1979, we saw how Deng Xiaoping attended President Carter in United States, where this opening up of the Chinese economy was promised, in exchange of which China imposed a single child policy to curb their domestic consumption and herd like cattle the Chinese labor for the manufacturing of the world. So when we see this unraveling, it's going to be as much a mayhem that we see in the West as much a mayhem that we are going to see in the Chinese economy, which is why I believe the Chinese Foreign Ministry came up with this public document where it listed out cultural hegemony of United States, economic hegemony of United States, completely bashing. And they started reorienting their population by the Chinese television, clearly orienting their population that $100 printing takes only 17 cents. And United States is consuming $100 of real Chinese goods with that note. So they are preparing their population for decoupling. But I do not see anything in the US or in the European Union about any orientation being given to their population about the new world that is coming in. So China is preparing for the collapse. I don't know if the Western population is ready for this.
So the Western population has always been in denial. Matlab, the administration has never really cared for their citizens. You can see the way Indians pulled out Indians from Ukraine, whereas the Western countries left their populations to fend for themselves.
Correct.
Sad but true. But at the G20, India has taken the lead on debt traps and sustainability.
Mhm.
So how do you see this play out in the context of the global South and China? And where does India get advantage to this?
So Prime Minister Modi has taken the lead of the entire de-dollarization process, as I've been explaining on many channels. So first he came up with a gold monetization scheme in 2015 to see if domestic gold can be taken to coffers for the de-dollarization process. That did not go so well, because we know the civilizational wisdom, people are not going to detach themselves from physical gold. So that was not successful. But all other steps that he has taken gives India a first mover advantage in the de-dollarized world, specifically how Visa and the other cards were, MasterCard, etc., were replaced with RuPay and UPI. About 35 plus countries already hinged on it. You have bilateral free trade agreements only signed up so that, when we go to the pegged currency world, each of these countries can be immediately flipped out of dollar with that free trade, individual free trade agreements. That was a very wise move, because all multilateral formats, they by default impose dollar on trade. So India made this very wise move of shifting out to individual free trade agreements. Now, when we say specifically after December 2022, I believe, Viniji, that was the deadline. If India would have gotten to that United Nations Security Council seat with a veto power by December 2022, because that was our the presidentship that month, and also the last position in the UNSC, because now there's a cooling period till 2028. I don't think the youth of this population or this government has any stomach to digest this delay, which is why I say that the leadership of global South is not something which is shocking that has come out from Delhi. So we believe that now we are the new leaders of the new de-dollarized pegged currency world. And I'll tell you why that is so. Xi Jinping, he tried digital yuan.
Yes.
And he is the manufacturing factory of the world today. Despite that, since 2019, he got no traction with other countries of the world. What is the problem? The problem of transparency with the Chinese Communist Party. As you already mentioned that the numbers are all fudged, including the GDP or the debt or whatever information that comes out of China. So he went to a 3 days Arab summit in Riyadh, where he was trying to assess if he is going to decouple from the West, what are the kind of commitments the Middle East gives to him in terms of trade. And to his shock, after 3 days of being there, he got a commitment of only $30 billion. Now, when you compare peanuts. Now, when you compare that with when MBS from Saudi or MBZ from UAE comes down to India to meet Prime Minister Modi, they come up with 70 billion and 100 billion targets of MOUs and partnerships they talk about. So, and they come here for doing it. Not that the Indian Prime Minister has to lay camping over there for 3 days to see what's going to come. So Xi Jinping today understands that in order for BRICS currency to be successful, the only method is that you keep India in between, because none of these countries are comfortable trading directly with Vladimir Putin or Xi Jinping economy. Because as I said, there's a transparency question mark over there. So, which is why I say that the gift city in Gujarat, where the new development bank is established, which is the regional office of the BRICS Bank, I
Yeah.
believe that is going to be the nodal agency handling the entire de-dollarization process. And I believe it's kind of a mini World Bank coming up. About 2.4 lakh crore of investments already declared, increasing the size to 3 times. 10,000 crore on the Ahmedabad airport, 10,000 crore on 3 railway stations, including one Ahmedabad. So I believe that the investment numbers which I'm seeing justifies the mini World Bank role that the government is looking at. And especially with the background of how the External Affairs Minister Jai Shankar brought 50 countries ambassadors for Navratri in Gujarat. I
Yeah.
believe I believe that these are the plans.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is well known that the EU is held ransom by Russian oil and Chinese manufacturing as well. So how will India extract advantage out of the situation, given that the manufacturing barely meets the EU quality standards?
Hmm. So, one thing that I believe, because I do geopolitical and geoeconomics reading, I can tell you one thing. India is looking at becoming the bridge between the East and the West, and a lot of Chinese decoupling with the Western economies has to do with what the US says is friend shoring.
Yeah.
What the Russians would tell is decoupling from the Western economies, right? All these words are, kind of a sham or a kind of a, a cloth over what we call as de-dollarization process. So I see a lot too many of manufacturing facilities along with technology transfer going to come to India. Now it's going to be India's choice about what to entertain and what not to entertain. So I believe that some of these Chinese factories would shift to Russia, some of
Mhm.
it to India, and some of it to Southeast Asia, like Vietnam, etc., where
Yeah.
they see this kind of a market. But overall, I can tell you, once we jump into a de-dollarized pegged currency world, I can tell you that Asia will not require the quantum of exports that Asia does today. And even if Asia wants, I do not believe the West will be in a position to afford buying Indian services or goods. So that is going to be the flip in the valuations of a lot many sectors which were otherwise artificially suppressed in valuations in the dollarized world. So manufacturing, farming, food logistics, food processing, the private defense sector, and precious metals. These are the sectors which were artificially suppressed in valuations to keep the fiat dollar reserve currency going. So all these sectors are going to jump like crazy, and there is going to be a huge beating in the services sector because services sector was born out of fiat reserve currency dollar. So a lot many of glorified service sector jobs are going to vanish in the new world.
Okay. That's a real eye-opener and a very scary situation for those all comfortable in their uh, corner offices, uh, doling out services to the Western world. So, despite the UPI market share going up sharply, currency in circulation keeps going up. So that needs an explanation. And, do you attribute this to increasing black money? And, we have a war on black money going on in our country. So by when do we expect the parallel economy to be crushed? And how will it happen?
So one thing that the entire world is right now preparing for is CBDC, the
Right.
central bank digital currency. Now, I call this a fully controlled communist currency. And this was required particularly because to stamp out the private cryptos which had jumped up in the last 2-3 decades. So post 2008 crisis, the US government officially pushed Bitcoin because it was looking at private cryptos as a backdoor entry of dollar in many countries.
Yeah.
Now that the countries of the world have said that these private cryptos are illegal, uh,
Yeah.
e- even if it is Bitcoin or even whatever the success ratio or the volume be, I believe that US has backtracked from that position. And now CBDC is something that the entire world is looking for to stamp out the private cryptos. So digital rupee, which will come up, which is already in trials in the retail and the wholesale transactions, though
Yeah.
not as much successful as at this point. You will have digital dollar. Similarly, you have the UK is also readying a digital pound. So all the countries are simultaneously going to launch the digital currencies this year. And I believe that since it is a fully controlled communist currency model where everything can be traced,
Yes.
what you are using for one fine day. I mean, this country might not see it, but the way the Chinese Communist Party functions, they have a digital score, whether you will have an access to something or not, whether you will be able to pay for something or not, all depends on how you behave in terms of the Chinese Communist Party polity. So eventually, in some parts of the world, you will see that this is going to become a kind of a terrorism, kind of a state control level. But as far as India is concerned, I believe this population is not going to replace physical cash with digital rupee to the extent how it is expected in other parts of the world, because we understand that a lot of unorganized sector operates on cash. Now, the point that you raised about the black money, uh, see, CBDC has a positive and negative. So the positive part is that the black money and the money laundering and all those terrorist finance or protest finance, all these anti-social or anti-country activities
Yeah.
can be curbed with this digital rupee format, which
Right.
is not possible in the cash economy. So I will see, you can see that when entities, because entities are going to have benefits like speed of transaction,
Yes.
low cost transactions. Of course, the ATMs are going to shut down, and a lot many of front operation desk of the bank branches are going to shut down because of digital rupee.
Yeah.
But we also need to understand one thing, that interest is not going to be offered in this digital currency format.
Mm.
uh, and in extreme circumstances, uh, in countries where we have seen negative interest rates,
Mhm.
this could be disastrous, because tomorrow, say, suppose you have a deposit of $20,000 in your account as salary, and if negative interest is going to be applied, it will become zap 18,000, right? So this is literally scary, because with a printed currency note, if it is 10 rupees, then it is 10 rupees.
Correct.
Uh, but if if a state goes wild, there is a lot of possibility in the Western countries where, especially because they would need a capital trimming to their economy in the post de-dollarized world. जो पूरा उनका sector inflated हो चुका है without because of reserve currency bubble. When that bubble gets pricked, when I'm saying that the salaries would have to come down, the socialist benefits would have to come down. If they artificially go to a negative interest rates, then this is very much possible that the electronic entries of money get zapped out like that with a negative interest application. So that is one scary thing which can happen in the future.
Right. You in your a lot of your Twitter feeds, I've seen you call the Ukraine-Russia war as a scripted war. You know, I'm sure that you have your reasons for believing that it is scripted war. So, what are the telltale signs that you observed that made you connect the dots and come to this inference?
So, Vinitji, we need to understand that post-Afghanistan exit, if you look at the timeline of the entire events that has happened, now nobody disputes the fact that the exit was decision of the United States. Nobody forced them to exit. Now, you understand that within few weeks of the exit, Saudi Arabia went ahead and signed a defense cooperation with Russia.
Yeah.
Now, principally speaking, this was the moment of reversal of that oil for security program for the dollarization.
Right away. Right away.
Right. So that was some, I'm saying that since 1971, all those events which happened for dollarization of the world, those are reversing one by one. So
Yeah.
first one was this, that reversal of oil for security program. Second reversal, you are seeing how the Chinese economy is curbing their exports. The latest report says European Union and American supplies are being slashed on an average by 12 to 21% in that range, whereas
Right.
exports to the Gulf has been increased. So we are seeing that it's artificially being pushed for consumption to the Gulf instead of West. So
Correct.
snatching from the West and supplying to the Gulf, right?
Right.
The people are being oriented to increase domestic consumption and the birth rates. So this is unraveling of the 1979 agreement between Deng Xiaoping and President Carter, right? Similarly, you see the unraveling of how in terms of the ban that they had on the gold of Russia. So the US forced European Union to ban the import of Russian gold, which is exactly what is needed for de-dollarization, that Russia accumulates gold, right?
Correct.
So, and then we saw in July, America passed on a huge chunk of gold to the Swiss refineries, and the Swiss refineries passed on that gold to China, again, which is exactly what is needed for de-dollarization, that
Right.
Asia accumulates physical gold. So all these signs, and you also see that none of the Western countries have sent boots on ground. And the way it is stretching, the script is stretching like chewing gum. You see that, a lot many of the weapon stock are emptying for the Western Europe and the NATO
Yeah.
countries. So these
Yeah.
are nothing but new defense orders, right? So we see it's completely a scripted kind of a thing. And even a kid can tell you that at the end of all of this, the outcome is going to be that Ukraine is going to lose territory. A
Correct.
kid can tell you. Despite that, since last 1.5 years, in social media and in the mainstream media, Putin is losing and Zelensky is winning. That is the
Correct.
narrative which is being played out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were being told that Putin will lose government because of internal chaos and bad economy. The fact is their economy is booming. Putin is
Yeah.
as is, and about 7 Western governments has fallen since Ukraine started.
Correct.
Exactly the opposite has happened.
Yeah.
So it's clear that it's all scripted.
So many believe in the aftermath of the war, Europe would break up. Do you believe this could happen? And how you see the shape of things panning out?
See, post abrupt exit from Afghanistan, it is very clear that the NATO military alliance, in principle, died that day because the European Union realized that this was nothing but channelizing US taxpayers' money through a so-called war on terror in Afghanistan into the pockets of the defense companies. There was no actual war on terror.
Right.
So the European Union, especially France, the Western Europe, now feels cheated with this alliance. And this is the second phase of that cheating, the Ukraine script, where we are seeing the entire European Union
Yeah.
being deindustrialized. They are
Yeah.
officially being deindustrialized.
Yes.
And the kind of, when I have some talks in private with a lot many of EU guys, they clearly tell that they envy India because India is independent and UK and EU are not. These are their words, not my
These
words.
are these are profound statements.
Yes, these are their words. And they say that we are being purposely taken to a position where we are economically finished off, because companies need energy, water, and food security as the basic minimum, the bare minimum to operate. So
Yeah.
all the companies which are moving out of Europe,
Yeah.
and the food supplies are gone, the energy security supplies are gone. It's like a total destruction of the European Union in terms of their economic strength.
Yeah.
So all looks like a scripted one for de-dollarization, where the US dollar is going to survive some value for itself by degrading the EU allies. This
Right.
is what it looks like.
So, we saw the Afghan war come to an end. We saw the Ukraine-Russia war play out. Yesterday there was talk about India being going to war with Pakistan and China if provoked. That is what a US think tank put out, right?
Hmm.
So do you think that India-China war would take place? I understand that with Modi as prime minister, that is not possible. But do you think that the larger game plan of Soros and gang is to introduce a weak PM in the country in place of the present regime and then instigate the India-China war, which would set India back, and they would achieve the same result that they are achieving with the Ukraine-Russia war vis-a-vis Europe?
So one portion I feel is definitely happening, which is a lot many of Western elements are not okay with the kind of strong nationalist government that we have today. And the way the Indian foreign minister has been very vocal about India's unique position and status in the world. I believe that there are a lot of elements which do not like this government and would like this government being replaced. So we already see how Adani Hindenburg played out. It was an internal sabotage with a nexus with the Western elements, where we see a role of Qatar investing in Credit Suisse, giving a 0 rating to Adani bond on the day of FPO. And prior to that, actually being a party to the FPO. So we all see these connections. They will try a lot many efforts until the 2024 elections. I, for myself, personally believe that they won't be successful because uh, the regime change operations, which they are, so talented about in other countries of the world, does not apply to the Indian world because it is so complex country of ours. Because I do not believe that they were expecting a lot many of protests on roads to happen with the Adani Hindenburg thing. Nothing like that happened, because we all understand the kind of resilience and the the karma theory of Indian dharmas subdues all kind of this animalistic instincts among the people. So you see that despite some events in some corners of the country here and there where you can have paid protest and that kind of stuff, I don't believe that this government could be moved in 2024 out. There will be attempts, but I don't think those attempts would be successful.
Personally, that's a very encouraging thing for me to hear, because we are all pro this this regime. So in your recent tweets, you had stated that the deep state has abandoned the USD. So in case that were to really happen, how do you see the socio-economic political situation play out in the US? Can it break up like Texas wants to secede from the US?
So a lot many of US based deep state companies, as I believe, are aligned with this de-dollarization process, which is why I see that they are going to shift and settle in India by 2030. And you'll also see the recent tweet, which I had predicted already, that you are going to have resident Indians as heads of global heads of operations of all these Western companies, not even NRIs. I'm talking resident Indians, right? So if you observe how Google and Microsoft head were allowed to meet the Indian Prime Minister, they were being told that you are supposed to bring the India head of operations along. Then only you are getting a meeting, right?
Right.
So you see, slowly and gradually, we are moving towards shifting and settling of these big Western companies of our choice coming here, and then gradually a resident Indian sitting on them as a global head of operations operating from India. This is what the long-term goal through this decade is. Now, your question about these companies ditching United States and especially the West. Vinayji, this is not something which is strange or something which I have found out new, because all these companies are the same companies which ditched Britain when British interest expense crossed the defense spending. So this has happened with all old global powers. This is not something which is new happening with the United States. Prior to Britain, the same thing happened with the Dutch, Portuguese, and Spanish. Their global power status was over. These companies ditched them, all the previous global powers, when the interest expense crossed their defense spending. This is the same moment which United States has arrived into. So you should not be surprised if these companies want to move out. And just look at the changes that has happened. Biden has come up with a huge taxation for billionaires.
Yes,
Just recently,
absolutely.
he's talking about massive capital gains tax. You think
Yes,
these billionaires are going to stay there anymore? They are the ones who are cooking all of this. So I believe that a lot of chaos will come in the US economy, as you suggested. Uh, there are a lot of, I am, trying to inform a lot many of diaspora about a generational wealth wipeout, which is going to come up because all the sectors of the West are inflated with the reserve currency bubble. So those properties which these guys are holding are going to come down massively. I'm
yeah,
trying to inform them. A lot, many of them want to come back to India as well. They are intent on it because they can also see the changes around. It's not that only I am saying and they would know.
yeah, yeah,
They can feel the changes around. Lot many of crimes are going to increase massively in the West because, as I told, they are being drugged with cheap, easy, low interest money since 1971.
absolutely.
The social fabric has completely nurtured itself for that fiat endless printing
Right.
with that kind of behavior, misbehavior within the family members, separating from parents, that kind of stuff. So a sudden shift and a reversal is going to create a lot of trouble and chaos in the Western society.
So do you envisage a situation where, they would like they're trying to break up India, talking about union of states, that the US itself would break up?
Uh, Now, in terms of breakup, now I'll tell you in the de-dollarized world, what would change for the Americans? One, officially they have 8,000 tons of gold with them, which
Yes,
is in terms of government coffers, which is the highest. I
yes,
mean, we don't trust what the Chinese figures and the Russian figures are. It could be more, but officially speaking, right now, United States has the highest gold reserves in its coffers. So pegging the currency won't be a big issue for the US economy. But after pegging, since the endless printing of currency is going to stop, as I said, the salary levels are going to come down. The socialist freebies will be cut,
yeah,
which is a massive shock to the American population,
yeah,
which we all can see will cause a lot of chaos within America. And since they have this, what we call as as you said, United States,
yeah,
it's a union of states. It's
yeah,
not the ancient Janapada structure, civilizational wisdom that we have. So it is very much possible that some states would uh, consider, just like in UK,
yeah,
Scotland is considering. So
correct.
it's very much possible that uh, within that moments of chaos, there would be such thoughts rolling out in the public. Now, how long that goes successful, because understand that these states were formed uh, with the thought process of keeping guns against the state, right?
Yeah,
They keep guns with the thought process that the state cannot be trusted, right?
yes,
So this is very unique to them, to their country, right?
yes.
So it is very much possible that there's going to be a lot of riots. I've already predicted 3, 4 states and their years where they will face riots. So riots and crimes is something that's going to shoot up. Now, if it translates into secession from the United States federal government, that is something which we need to see what's going to happen.
Okay. So, we've spoken about this part, but, if we don't talk about the Islamic world, which is one of the largest religions globally, 54 countries,
Hmm.
you know, I would like to understand how you foresee the Islamic world shaping up once the Ayodhya temple or the third pole is functional. You know, broadly, there are four large geographic regions where Islam has a toehold. Absolutely. Europe, MENA, which is the Africa, Far East, West Asia, the Indian subcontinent, and also the Far East. how you see each zone de-radicalize from their extreme form of
Hmm.
a religion.
So, as I've been saying that the Gulf has realized that it lost its crude oil wealth, 50% of it, in playing with uh, the radicalization agenda to keep the US dollar going. It funded that entire radicalization process, not just in the Indian subcontinent, but also in the Middle East.
Yeah.
What I call as the two buckets theory in my book, where the healthy nation is told by United States that look, your neighbor is a rogue country, needs to be sanctioned, which is why now you have to continue with the US dollar, right?
Yeah.
So there are international experts who would tell you that the Russian sanctions on Russia and the sizing of their forex reserves caused all of this, which I believe is a total wrong argument, because they have to sanction Russia. That is how the US dollar survives. One bucket
Yes.
has to be sanctioned, the other bucket gets arms and money, right? That is how it
Yes.
functioned all through its life. So I believe that the Gulf has now got that realization, which is why they see the support in the Prime Minister Modi, wherein
Yeah.
they have adopted and chosen India for yoga, Ayurveda, and mandirs in the Gulf to de-radicalize their traditional religious doctrine-based society. So Gulf is moving towards diversifying its economy outside of the crude oil business, which is why you see Saudi Arabia has recently given statement that India is our top priority. Similarly, Australia gives a statement, India is at the center of all that we are going to do. So we are seeing that the entire world is trying to tie back its civilizational ties to the Indian subcontinent. After all, Indian Ocean is the pivot of the global economics. This is from
Yeah.
where 90% of the oil, gas, raw materials, and the resources flow. So it's no surprise that the rest of the world wants to join back its civilizational ties with the Indian subcontinent. So de-radicalization is one of the process which I believe is equal to de-dollarization, because uh, the radicalization doctrine was pushed by the West in order to keep the US dollar going.
Yeah.
So when the Gulf is taking a reversal in that, you are seeing Saudi Arabia coming up with a concept of Neom City, which I believe is a greater Israel concept.
Yes.
The rabbis have started flowing in and talking about Saudi Arabians adopting a Jewish way of life. Similarly, you see UAE naming a portion as a Hind city,
Yes.
and completely moving towards the Hindu ties that they had. So I believe that Gulf is going to take this path of de-radicalization process, which is why you can eventually see by 2047, UAE could be the first country, first official Hindu nation in the world. Saudi Arabia could be the first Jewish majority, and Iran could be the first Christian majority in the region. So I believe that these are the kind of changes. Now, as long as the Indian subcontinent de-radicalization goes, it harps on the Pakistan occupied Kashmir question. If we are able to arrest back that geography, uh, there is very much a possibility of uh, the entire convert population coming back to the awareness, because this was a fake experiment based on religion which was created in 1947. Now,
Yes.
if that is collapsing, uh, that what the converts see as their ideal structure based on a religious doctrine, if that is collapsing, then it is very much possible that the Indian subcontinent, which is Bangladesh, India, and Pakistan, coming back to the realization कि शीशे में जो दिख रहा है, जो फेस आईज फेस का स्ट्रक्चर, वो तो भगवान राम वाला ही है. You cannot change your parents, you can change your clothing, you can
Yes.
change your names, right? You can change your practices, you can keep a big daddy, but that doesn't change your parents.
Yeah.
You just can't do that. Your DNA is going to remember how the nose of Bhagwan Ram was. So you're going to get that nose only. You can't change that. So it's just about the moment of realization of coming back home. It's a question of celebration for the Indian subcontinent
Yeah.
if that awareness comes back and this entire identity crisis is solved.
So how does this integration happen in our subcontinent?
Integration in terms of
In social integration of the various things that we just spoke about, how do the Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, and Indians,
hmm,
come together on this?
yeah. So we have to first understand that you have to come together on other portions of the economy, where we see that the Sri Lankans are now very much open to, a complete guidance-based foreign policy and defense policy based on what Delhi guides them. Similarly, Maldives is now ready for that. Sri Lanka is
Right.
also discussing cutting down their defense budget for it, right? If
Yeah.
that is because they've seen the kind of infrastructure and the training facilities which the Indian Army has. Now,
Yes.
why do these smaller nations in the Indian subcontinent require a separate defense budget? It just makes no sense, right? Similarly, you see Bangladesh is talking about a joint defense production. So
Right.
once the unraveling of independent policies happen, and they realize that they can trust Delhi on majority of their policy decisions, just like Bhutan does,
Yes.
I believe that this integration is going to be super easy because the only trigger point that we are looking at is the Pakistan occupied Kashmir, because that will be the focal point of the momentum that it needs to take place for this awareness to come that none of them have come from outside India. They are Indian subcontinent people and converted because of some mishappening that happened in history under the Islamic rule. So that awareness is that's what we are looking for.
Right. So, we mentioned in passing that, we expect this regime to continue in India. But I would like to answer this question more specifically is that will Modi win 24? And what is the outside chance that, the Western lobby backed opposition will dislodge Modi?
So first of all, those elements who are uh, trusting Rahul Gandhi to deliver something, I mean, they should have a mental checkup for themselves. Because if it's Soros or any of these cabal who think that they are investing in a person who's going to deliver some results, I think that person that person is unable to deliver even a CT level result in terms of anything. So I believe it's a very wrong choice that they have done to park their investments in counting for some delivery.
Yeah, and just $1 billion at
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And the kind of investments which this some of the Western elements did during Adani Hindenburg and during that BBC issue, I think
Yes.
despite the fact that their cronies telling them or reporting them whatever wrong information, I believe they would have done their own self-assessment by now that none of this works. Uh, Now, which takes to a kind of challenge where a kind of a physical sabotage of the leader is something that they could be considering if they are going to have those kind of plans with themselves.
Yeah.
But I believe that is also not a good idea, because if Prime Minister Modi is going to be replaced by someone with a replacement leadership, I believe that replacement leadership does not have any room for with which who you can negotiate anything. At least Prime Minister Modi listens to what the opposite faction has to speak. At least he gives audience to you.
Yes.
The probable replacement of him will shut the door.
Yeah.
So I don't think that. I think they should pray Prime Minister Modi to continue, because there's some possibility of give and take and adjustments with him compared to the possible replacement.
So, in my opinion, Modi has advanced India by the hour and not years, in my opinion. So, we see changes happening every hour, the way he works. And, obviously, Modi has a finite life. So I'm sure that Modi has thought about this too. So do you believe that there is a clear roadmap with timelines to take India into the next 25 years, or the Amrit Kal that he speaks about? And after Modi, who is it going to be next? Is it going to be Yogi or somebody else? Who, in your opinion, will be his likely successor?
Well, BJP as a party has groomed a lot many of tier 2 and tier 3 leaders. In tier 2, you obviously see Smriti Irani ji, Shah, Amit Shah ji, then you have Yogi ji, and you also have Himanta Biswa. In tier 3, you have Annamalai and Tejasvi Surya coming up in the south. Similarly, they have some leaders in the north as well. So I believe that their tier 2 and tier 3 is also ready and will be ready for taking over the mantle. As long as their vision is concerned, I can tell you they do not plan anything less than 30 years. So because I can give you on and on examples of how each date they choose for each event, right?
You've
So
spoken about it in one of your earlier podcasts.
yes, yes, a lot. I mean, everything goes as planned. So uh, that kind of intricate planning is what they do, and they have 20, 30 years. That would be minimum that they would have planned. I'm talking minimum, right?
Yeah,
So, which is why you see a lot of patience in terms of implementation. Now, a lot of Indian population would feel this has been that 2 terms. This is the second term going on, about to end, and they are getting restless. They feel a lot many of our uh, core Hindu objectives not yet being achieved. This is what going on in people's mind. But these guys need to slow down and understand the fact that everything has need to have a correct timing,
yeah,
uh, a correct narrative backup, without causing any kind of chaos. Where when you introduce new things, they should appear normal, appealing, and in a celebratory mode rather than causing chaos. Right. So when 370/35A was removed, few days from there, you can hear Mehbooba Mufti saying Jai Hind. So
yeah,
when you do a back end calculation of what you want to see as an experience after a reform, you calculate back your steps from that point to today, and that is how you plan events, right? So you want reforms to happen in a celebratory mode, because
right.
that's natural to the Indian civilization. You also need to believe that remaining in power uh, is also equally important rather than haphazard implementation of decisions,
Yes,
right? So they have the list of all the jobs that they got to do, and they have had 14 years of experience in Gujarat, and they have faced all of these, from farmer protest to Bollywood protest to international cabal to visa ban. All of these they have seen in Gujarat and handled. So believe me, they have the experience of how to handle stuff.
fantastic. Just two questions before we end up. So, coming to the technology disruption, AI has taken center stage. How do you see the life of an average employee in this AI world? Will there be enough job creation? I ask this question in context of a teeming billions of Indians who are, you know, young, less than 30 years of age. What is their future like?
So this is one of the question which I talked about, that how Abrahamic economics focuses on machine factor of production and is pitting the machine factor of production against the man factor of production, instead of keeping the man as the center of the entire economic spectrum.
Yeah,
So as I say, Sanatan economics model, which I'm working on, should be the answer to this, wherein we have to come up with a balance of adopting technology in a way where the man factor of production does not need to be replaced by technology but complemented by technology, and we are able to give a sustainable economic goals to the entire youth that is coming up, because next 3 decades, being having the youngest population in the world, we should be productive as well, to reach the economic throne that we need to. So coming back to your question, the machine factor of production, how we are going to curb it or tame it in a way, in a Bharatiya system where it does not cause harm to the man factor of production. So we want technology, but we do not want technology to take over. That kind
Right.
of middle dharmic path that we need to take, which is why this model is something that I'm working on. I'll come up with new indexes which across the industry sector, how technology needs to be equipped.
Okay. And the last one, which everyone would like to know, is Pakistan breakup and the possible refugee influx. How will we deal with that?
So a lot many of Pakistanis, they need to be yet oriented on the fact that the two-state theory has failed. So until and unless this acknowledgement comes from the Pakistani society, the chaos that they are in is going to continue. They have to themselves accept this fact that the two-state theory was a flawed theory. When this happens, as you said, there are two scenarios. One is the collapse and the refugee influx problem, which you are talking about. And second is a handover of Pakistani governance in the style where Delhi is going to call the shots on how they are going to govern themselves. Because the education that the format that they have, where clerics are giving religious doctrine to the students and the convocated jihadis coming out from the education system, this needs at least 80 to 100 billion of revamp investment. I'm talking just the economics.
Yeah.
The orientation of the society is the
That's
second part.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah.
a separate part altogether.
Yeah.
But this is the minimum investment Pakistan requires, even after it loses POK, if it wants to survive the remaining geography and operate successfully.
Yeah.
So I believe that surrender to Delhi's governance is the only viable step. I don't know if they are going to have this much brain. I'm not sure. But if that is not the path which they are taking, then this refugee influx and collapse of Pakistan into further parts like Sindhu Desh would be different, Baluchistan would be different, there will be Pashtunistan would be different, there would be a separate Punjab, right? So further collapse is possible until and unless they come to this realization that submission to Delhi's governance is the only way forward. क्योंकि अम्मी अब्बू इधर ही है, वो बाहर ढूंढ रहे हैं, कभी टर्की में ढूंढ रहे हैं, कभी मंगोल में ढूंढ रहे हैं, कभी पता नहीं अरब को बना देते हैं अम्मी अब्बू, पता नहीं. So when they come out of this identity crisis which they are in, I think that is when they will be faced with these two options: either further collapse and refugee influx, which is going to be a headache for the Indian government, or handing over the governance to Delhi कि आप जैसे बोल रहे हो, we are going to operate that way. और ये 1971 में ही हो जाना चाहिए था with the Pakistan regiment, the 90,000 जो prisoner of wars आपने छोड़ दिए. अगर मैं NSA होता तो उनको मैं 90,000 को पाकिस्तान रेजिमेंट बना के इंडिया में रखता and I would have banned them from keeping a separate army. वो मैं तभी कर चुका होता. तो कुछ इस तरह का जहां पे जनपदस को चाहिए ही नहीं, उनको क्यों आर्मी रखनी है, किस लिए रखनी है? If you are part of the Indian subcontinent, why do you want a separate defense budget? I don't see any value in it. Why do you want to waste expenditure, right?
So fire the army, save the money, and indoctrinate yourself.
Yeah,
that's the way for Pakistan.
That's the way.
Amazing, Ankit. Every time I listen to you, I have new learnings, and it was lovely having you on the show. And I hope that whoever listens to you will benefit from this. Personally, I'm going to send this out to all my corporate contacts so that they understand what it is to, how they can realign strategy for investing in the new.
And many of them would require to sail through this de-dollarization chaos.
Yes.
So you can certainly send me leads of companies who would like to take some kind of advisory or suggestions from me, I would be more
Absolutely.
to do that.
Absolutely. So all the corporate managers and entrepreneurs listening into this podcast, you know whom you have to get into touch with. And you can always reach out to Ankit on his Twitter feed at Ankit at IIMA.
Yep.
Thank you very much, Ankit.
Namaskar.
Pleasure talking to you.